Every day the headlines scream at us, housing's unaffordable, inflation's hurting, wars are raging, the climate's under threat. It can feel like the world is spinning out of control. But what if I told you that despite all these challenges, we're actually living in the best time in human history? Longer lives, less poverty, safer societies, more opportunity, and technologies our grandparents couldn't have ever imagined. Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and in today's Demographics Decoded podcast, I'm joined by leading demographer Simon Kuestenmacher, and we're going to take a step back, look at the big picture, and show you why life is better now than at any time in the past, and what that means for you and your family and your investments. Simon, you and I both know the media makes money selling fear, but if we zoom out and look at what's really happening, it's a different picture, isn't it?
Of course, absolutely. And as humans, we're meant to, look at those problems first. It's the idea that we live in this savanna and you'd rather be scared of the saber-toothed tiger once too often. But ultimately, history is a story of more or less continued progress. Of course, there are occasionally plagues and pandemics and wars and floods and whatever that slow this down. But ultimately, it is an onwards march towards progress, and that is absolutely fantastic. And if I was asked where in history I would want to live, answer must always be the present day. The past is much, much worse than the present by a long shot. The further way you go back.
Well, Simon, some people are going to think, oh, this is going to be a kumbaya session and I may not want to listen. But the answer is we're going to share with you data and information about the present, but also about the future. So this will be useful for you if you're an entrepreneur, a business person, you're part of an organization, and investors also to understand not just the present, but what the future holds. Because I sometimes joke that if people think things are bad now, they should imagine life in the 1800s. Many people were toothless by 35. I remember when I grew up, a lot of people for their 21st birthday had their teeth taken out and had sets of false teeth put in. Today you get those four implants or
Wow.
whatever it is.
Oh.
Life is very different today. And if you think about those being the good old days, today is going to be the years you look back at and say they were the good old days as well. So I want one of the messages for us today to also be enjoy and appreciate what we're going through at the moment, Simon.
Yeah. So there's one maybe important initial comment to make here. When we reminiscent about the good old days, when we just become also melancholic about the past, and we are not thinking back of the 1980s, the 1970s. We are thinking back of our own 20s, of our own teenage years. We're thinking back of our own youth. We are glorifying our own youth. We're not glorifying this decade that our own youth happened to been in. Because of course our youth was bloody awesome, because this was before you had all the responsibilities and so forth.
Yes.
And in a sense, when you are amidst of all those responsibilities and your limitations, maybe your declining health, whatever it is, you want this invincible body of yours back in the teenage years. You want this careless time back. So we confuse this sometimes, that we are only, we want our own past back, not the past back.
Well, are we then really living in the best time in history, or is it just wishful thinking, Simon?
Well, let's look at a couple of measures of health. You're definitely healthier now than you were ever in the past. So that definitely tells me I'd rather live in the present. Wealth, we became wealthier as a nation. We are becoming richer. We have access to more conveniences. That's pretty good. We are safer than we were ever before. Also are pretty good. I'm talking about stuff like safety in cars, safety from food, safety from flying is safer than it was before. All of those things are safer, and we're more educated. For example, that's also nice. We are on average a much smarter bunch than we were ever in the past. Maybe not wiser, some people would criticize that, but ultimately humanity as a whole, you look at poverty, you look at literacy, you look at child mortality, all of these things much, much better now than ever before.
Well, obviously there are still problems and we're not denying that, but over the long term, the trajectory is up and positive, and we're living a much better life that people even a couple of generations ago could just not have imagined. Now, we've discussed some of this in the past. If you're new to this show and you don't currently subscribe or follow, please click the subscribe button so each week you get the wisdom of Simon and I are going to share. And maybe you should also just send this show to somebody else, share it with us, with somebody who you think would benefit as well. Simon, technology seems to be scaring some people. In my mind, this is good. AI, yeah, it's a bit uncertain, but automation, social media, I guess there are positives and negatives to that. Are these things actually making our life better?
So I would argue on average, technology so far made our life better. Each technology brings certain kind of challenges. Each technology is a disruption of a healthy, comfortable status quo, at least for some. So if I'm being fired because the boss says we're now replacing your job with AI, that sucks for me. That is absolutely a given. But overall, if we say we create more technology, we throw more technology at the economy, ultimately that should create more wealth. And to some degree, this wealth gets distributed across the society, which translates into higher healthcare spending, longer lives, healthier lives. And we will always find stuff to do for humans. So I'm not ever convinced that we create this environment where all the stuff worth doing is being done by robots and algorithms. And then we just sit around and wait to die. That's not happening. There's plenty of stuff to do for humans in whatever scenario I can come up with. And so I'm still very much on the pro technology side of things. That doesn't mean that I do not want technology to be regulated, because after a while we do realize where technology has created certain kind of problems. We, for example, know a lot of negative impacts that social media can have, especially
Yeah.
on young people. And we're
Yes.
now slowly regulating this. We've seen South Australia been the first, country state legislation around the world that actually starts to minimize access for kids to that stuff, to protect them. And we'll see more of that. And that's a good way of us to find a smart access to technology.
Technology's also made a lot of things much cheaper. One of the other big changes that's often overlooked is health and life expectancy. Just how big have the gains been, Simon?
They're wonderful, wonderful stories. We now live on average to about 85. That's about our median age of death in Australia, 125 years ago. So it's not too long ago. 1900, that was 55 years. So over 125 years, we gained 3 decades worth of life on average. That is fantastic. These are unheard of advances in life expectancy. Just think about your life ends at 85 rather than at 55. That is huge. And I take that over any previous thing on average. And it's
But
not
not
just that
just healthier, Simon, more active. I'm
oh,
at my age more active than this. I'm at the age where, unfortunately, my father died at this age, but he wasn't anywhere near as fit or active or involved in life in his early 70s.
exactly. And I remember this. So when I grew up thinking about people of retirement age, these were like old, decrepit people in what we know as a primary school kids, really, really old people. And now you are active and fit. That's because you're healthier. Your spare parts, can be replaced and so forth.
True.
And that's good stuff. These are massive advances. If you think about the medical things that we do to you that make your life so much better, anyone who got a hip replacement, just imagine that. Just the whole concept of you literally cut out a piece of a hip and you give people a whole new hip. Like this makes it is bonkers, the kind of stuff that we can do. That people get a new heart, these kind of things. Like what? A pacemaker, a pretty standard operation now. That these things exist is an absolute marvel. And you'd rather live in a world where these things occur rather than where they do not.
Well, both my grandfather and father died of a heart attack. Now, interestingly, they were both smokers and I'm not, but today they would have had a stent put in place to perfuse their heart and they would have been living longer.
Absolutely. That operation, again, just multiply this for a whole population, just how wonderful that is. That you live healthier and better lives. But of course, we quickly get used to taking this for granted as well. So it's quite astonishing how easy we think that this is normal rather than stopping for a little bit to acknowledge just the benefits that you reap from that.
Sure. So I'm suggesting that we should forget the doom and gloom and appreciate what the current world is giving us, but we still hear about inequality, about global poverty, even though that's fallen dramatically, hasn't it?
Yeah, so you can measure poverty in many ways. A really nice measurement is called extreme poverty. So you spend, that is when you have less than, I think, $3.15 per day, US dollars. That's not a lot of money. And this is, of course, inflation adjusted numbers and so forth. And in 1990, it was about 2 million people, 2 billion people in the world that were just poor, that had less than $3.15 each day. There's still 700 million people today that fall into this threshold. These people are desperately poor. But this is, in total terms, third of what it was 35 years ago. And in relative
The
terms,
population's boomed considerably since then, Simon.
exactly. In relative terms, these advancements are even more extraordinary. So we did
Yes.
lift the overall level of wealth in the world, and that is huge human progress. The idea of not acknowledging human progress is mad, in my opinion, because we must understand that the things that we are doing, to at least a certain degree, help millions, actually almost billions of people.
Yes.
They do have a better life. Being in poverty is better than being in extreme poverty. And so we push people to this. Then we create, if you look at Asia over the last 2.5 decades, the largest emergence of a middle class in human history. That is fantastic that we did this. These people are better off. Not saying that everything is perfect and whatever, but ultimately much, much better off to live in Asia of today than in Asia of 2000.
I think, as you said a moment ago, we tend not to appreciate it. At the end of last year, Pam and I did a cruise around the South China Sea, and we stopped off on an island in the Philippines. And while on the one hand, Manila is a big city in the Philippines with high-rise stories and Gucci shops and all the fancy stores, this island, people were living basically day to day. The fishermen went out and fished, and when they came in, they traded the fish with the people who were growing rice. They didn't have refrigerators. They couldn't afford the refrigerator. They couldn't even afford the electricity for the refrigerators. So there are still parts of the world where people are living in poverty, but we don't tend to appreciate that, and we complain about the challenges we have in Australia. We are very lucky where we're living, including the fact that more and more Australians have become educated, have higher education levels. Is that been a good thing? Literacy improving, worldwide education improving, more females going to university?
Marvelous advances. Like, if you think about education as a whole, in Australia, we talk about sending more and more people into universities, so becoming really educated. We take it as an absolute given that you finish high school. If people don't finish high school, we talk about this is an absolute catastrophe. These are people left out of the education system. And I wrote columns about this at Mass. And you go, okay, so that's our view of education. Do you then go back and go like, literacy rates? We now have 12% of the global population being illiterate. 12%. In 1950, again, this is not a long time ago, 1950, 64% of the world
Wow.
was illiterate.
Yeah.
So from 64% to 12% not being able to read in very much a human's lifetime is awesome. That is really, really cool. And then, of course, we now throw more women into the education systems around the world. That is very, very helpful to do this. We know that this minimizes long-term poverty. This increases the labor pool. This just makes for healthier, more educated societies, which in turn are actually societies that are harder to depress from a dictatorial perspective and so forth. So that is rather cool that we do this, and it is moving in the right direction. Every now and then we see something like the Taliban in Afghanistan making progress go backwards, and that is the extreme exception from the rule. Absolutely depressing if you read this, but it is very much an upwards march towards a wiser and smarter and more educated population on average.
One of the big things I've seen over the last decades in my life is social progress, gender equality, more rights for LGBTQ plus communities, more racial awareness, more inclusion for disabled people. I know it's all far from perfect, but boy, things have changed even in the last couple of decades, again, proving the point that we're trying to make, that we're living at the best time in history.
Yeah, Uh, and totally. And all of those things are the result of hard fights. If you think about it, you can read histories of disability inclusion. Very, very hard fights. Same for just the rights of women to vote, of women to drink beer in a pub in Australia. If you read all those stories, it is kind of hilarious that this needed to be fought. But you do this from this perspective where you go, that's a given. And so this social progress keeps occurring. And most importantly, we create a container, particularly in Australia, where these battles can be fought peacefully, where we kind of find a new norm. And we do see ultimately the direction seems to be pretty clear. Ultimately, we to become more inclusive, which is a wonderful thing. We become richer and healthier. So the whole container and system of Australia, it's not doing all that many things wrong. It is actually working rather well.
Now, I think we're preaching to an audience who are already optimistic. The following for Demographics Decoded keeps growing. We see that with how many people like the show, comment on the show, share it with their friends. But I guess the message today is to be appreciative of what you've got. And I guess part of what our team at Metropole do is try and help you plan for your financial security by giving strategic property and wealth advice. So if you're wanting to take advantage of living in this best country in the world, not advantage of people, but wealth creation opportunities, why not have a chat with my team at Metropole, whether you're a home buyer or a property investor, and allow us to put a strategic plan together for you to help you plan to become the people you plan to become and grow your wealth through property. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but just go to metropole.com.au. While we're doing that for individuals, Simon, I know you and the demographics group do it at a bigger level, helping businesses, organizations and industries plan for their future by understanding demographics.
Exactly. I think our intent is the same. It's all based on my simple understanding or belief that if you view the future from more perspectives, you are able to make smarter, better decisions. And we are telling people the demographic perspective. We're working with them in our consulting arm. We're working with them in a very specific way to understand what their business looks like from the demographic perspective. And we believe, of course we would, that this makes you a better business. It makes you a better government if you do those things. Yeah, and that's what I do if I'm not recording podcasts.
Well, I'll leave a link in the show notes so people can get in contact with you and your team to see how you can help them. Now, unfortunately, we know that wars have been raging around the world the last couple of years, seems to be getting the headlines more than ever. But overall, is the world safer than it has been before?
So the answer at the moment is 10 years ago, the answer was very simple. 10 years ago, the world has been gotten heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps safer. Fewer deaths, war-related deaths year after year, much, much better. There has been a small uptick over the last couple of years. So that's the trend is at the moment pointing in the wrong direction. We still, however, record low rates of war-related deaths in historical terms. So of course, you have an outlier there in the Ukraine war in particular, where literally hundreds of thousands of people have died. That is a lot in just one swoop hit, so to speak. And so, yeah, any kind of peace efforts there are highly, highly appreciated. But ultimately, yeah, at the moment, things, we look at Gaza, we look at Sudan, we look at Ukraine in particular, these things are driving up those numbers.
That's a shame. One of the things we do seem to take for granted today, though, is convenience. Again, if we're looking at why is today the best time in the world to live, it's changed how we do things in all ways. Just the ability to shop online, to get things delivered to you, to research online. Convenience is something that has changed considerably with the smartphone.
Absolutely. Just think of all those things. Any song you ever listen to, 1 second on Spotify, it is there. Books, any book you want to read, instantly there via your Kindle, via your phone app. Marvelous. Food, online stuff, just delivered to your doorstep in essentially no time. Amazon, 1 or 2 day delivery for most products. Absolutely crazy when you think about this. So this is very, very convenient. Here above me, you might see an aircon or aircon heater unit. Easy. These things just, we look a bit longer term now, but I can have my room on whatever temperature I want. This is very, very convenient. The idea of traveling could, if we go back only 100 years, you could travel from Europe to Australia. It was more expensive than it is now, and it took months on a boat. It is now cheaper, and it takes you a day on an airplane. Pretty cool, pretty convenient. And so all of those things add on. Research, if you think about academic life, um, just going to a library, to the library catalog, finding stuff took forever. Now this is a quick search away.
May I
Transcribing.
interrupt for a sec, Simon? What I did today, you just reminded me, was I heard about a book on, somebody mentioned to me, a book written many years ago about influence and persuasion. I've just had my book, Negotiate, Influence, Persuade, republished in the 3rd edition. And this was somebody who'd written about this a number of years ago. The author has since died. So I asked ChatGPT to summarize it for me, his 30 lessons, and it actually found the book somehow or other, summarized it, and then said, would you like me to give you a property perspective on this, knowing what I'm interested in, and actually told me how these points would be useful for me and in my life. And in a couple of minutes, I had a 2-3 page summary of the book with what it meant for me. That was amazingly convenient.
And I think it is just wonderful to continue to be blown away when those things occur, because this is an actual practical thing that happened to you. So those things just make us more productive, because you got insight that you wanted in less time, so you have more time to spend on other things. This could be either productivity, or it could just be more time with your family. So these are cool developments that occur. Yeah, there is more of that. We could just endlessly rattle down those examples, but I think the underlying goal is to still be blown away, to still appreciate that this is actually occurring.
Appreciate this, because as I said, these are the good old days, or they will be in the future. So for investors and business people listening, what does this progress mean in practical terms, Simon?
But from a business perspective, it's just pure opportunity. That means the more innovation you throw at it, the more the growing population in the future can actually create stuff. So the human ambition is always to create more wealth, to be more creative, to understand ourselves more. If you think about things like just just listen to young teenagers, how much just psychological vocabulary they use. So they have a relatively deep understanding of, or basic understanding of, their whole inner workings that previous generations didn't have. That's cool. That is progress in practical terms. And with this kind of awareness, you will be able to be a better business owner, employer, employee, whatever it is. So that's pretty cool. And all of this additional knowledge, we can then throw at the problems that we have. And I think if we collectively wanted to build better housing, cheaper housing, and we're now able to pull this off. You've all seen this, these factory-built housing models, where you think, what would this look like in the future? Robots building houses and so forth, 3D printing housing. This was just pure science fiction decades ago, and it is now in
Yes.
operation.
Yeah. So, Simon, if we're living in the best time in history, and I believe we are, what's the biggest risk? If you asked me, I'd think complacency, maybe, just not appreciating it. Stop whinging.
It is complacency. It's the idea of thinking that progress happens automatically. Each of those wonderful bits of progress, conveniences that we talked about in this podcast, could have wonderful histories written about them, of people fighting for this to occur, of people thinking extremely hard, of big teams of people creating these types of solutions. So this isn't coming just magically, but it is coming in a very, very almost certain way, because we throw so much more productivity, so much more insight at these problems, that I'm absolutely convinced that the future will be yet more exciting, yet safer, yet healthier than the present is at the moment.
But you should enjoy the journey, otherwise you won't end up enjoying the destination, because the world has got problems. It always has had that. But as we've gone through now, I hope our listeners and viewers understand the data has shown we're healthier, we're wealthier, we're safer, we're more connected than ever before. So if you're an investor, an entrepreneur, or simply just planning for your family's future, That's something to be optimistic about. And once a week, Simon and I get together and share our thoughts about the trends shaping our futures. So again, if you haven't subscribed to this show yet, wherever you're listening to this, click the subscribe button. And please also do Simon and me a favor. The only favor we ask of you, get one other person to understand these things by sharing the show with somebody. Living in the best time in history has given us extraordinary advantages. So my question to you, our viewers and listeners, are you going to use them? Are you going to take advantage of them? Simon, thank you so much. I look forward to catching up with you again next week. Our show
Mark.
comes out every Wednesday.
Fantastic. I'll catch you very soon.
This Demographics Decoded podcast has been brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Just go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property advisory, wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team at Metropole will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades and we've been helping clients with for well over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. In between these Demographics Decoded shows, you can follow me on social media, and I suggest you also follow Simon Kuestenmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all social media platforms. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody who may also benefit, please tell them about Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us in our quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to be shaping their future. And of course, if you don't currently subscribe, we'd love you to. And of course, any of the information that we've been sharing with you is general information because we don't know your specific circumstances.